Here's a video you might not want to watch, but I do think it's important. When is the radical left actually right? I don't mean right-leaning, I mean correct. What have they got properly pegged? What can we learn from them? Even though they're often just a bunch of clowns who have no idea how the real world works, they also regularly have important and powerful insights, and we would do well not to ignore them. This video might be the one that actually gets me cancelled by my own audience, but I do believe it to be the truth, so I don't care. No offense, guys. Come into this with an open mind, alright? Firstly, intersectionality is correct. For those of you who don't know, intersectional theory is the idea that you have privilege or oppression based on your various characteristics, and that each individual characteristic intersects to form a new identity. It was described to me by my gender studies professors as being the bars of a cage, where one bar is your sex, another bar is your race, another bar is your ethnicity, your nationality, your gender identity, your sexual orientation, etc., etc. And that while one individual bar may not be oppressive, when they're all summed up, they form the thing that entraps you. They often like to use an image like this that kind of describes the theory, where each of these various characteristics overlap. And the more overlapping that happens where you are, the more oppressed you are. This is where you get the idea of the progressive stack, or the oppression Olympics, where a black man might be oppressed, but he's not as oppressed as a black gay woman, or something along those lines. The problem with this image is that this phenomenon functions less like a Venn diagram and more like a chart. An ever-expanding chart where every single identity can be multiplied by every single other identity. You have to fractionate race with gender, okay. Let's say you have two genders, male and female. Let's say you have 3 races, white, black, Asian. I know this is very oversimplified, but just hear me out. That means that you have 6 fractionations, the 3 races multiplied by the 2 genders. But now you have to add in all the other genders that the radical left insists exists. You also have to add in all the other races. So suddenly you have many different identities. And we haven't even gotten to sexual orientation yet, or gender identity, or ethnicity, nationality, disability, class, or socioeconomic status. And when we talk about those things, are we just going to talk about their income? Or is there more to it than that? How about debt? The problem with intersectional theory is, despite being technically correct, it is a completely unworkable theory in practice because there are simply too many identities to fractionate. Again, that's where you get the oppression Olympics. I mean, how do we determine who has it worse? One person says, I'm a gay male. One person says, I'm a gay female. One person says, I'm a black gay female. I'm a black gay female who's trapped in an abusive relationship. I'm a bisexual trans Latina illegal immigrant who just got diagnosed with cancer and who has a child who should be going to one of the best schools in the country because he has a phenomenal IQ, but I just can't afford it. You know, all these situations suck in their own way. Everyone has something that makes them oppressed, even the straight white males. So how do you figure out who's more oppressed? And most importantly of all, who gets to decide? Who will be the arbiter of who is the most oppressed, and therefore should have more resources allocated to them by the state? Because reparations are one of the long-term goals of the intersectionalists. So the person who gets to decide how oppressed you are, that's not some minor point in the conversation, that is the linchpin. Who gets to decide? How do you know that they're being accurate? How do you know they're being impartial? How do you know they're not corrupt? Their power would have to basically be everywhere. They'd have to have tendrils in every single aspect of society in order to properly do this. How does this system not instantly devolve into a tyranny? I mean, at least with capitalism, unless we're talking about extreme disparities between like the ultra rich, the 1% of the 1%, and people who are like homeless or something. But in most cases, within capitalism, all this stuff is rolled up into the price that you pay. You know, you've got poor, oppressed, victimized you with all of your problems, and you might need something. So you go out to a store and you go to buy it. And then the shopkeeper, who has all of his poor oppressions and victimizations, things that you don't see because you're only interacting with him for a few seconds, he's willing to sell you something for a price. And all of his oppression is packed into his price, and all of your oppression is packed into the amount that you're willing to pay for it. And sometimes you can negotiate, sometimes you can cut a deal, sometimes you can just go look elsewhere. But at the very least, with capitalism, there is some kind of understanding that yes, we're all in this together, but that also means that you have to pay your own way, because they gotta eat too. They will give you something that will improve your life, and you have to give something that will improve their life in turn. And generally what that thing is what they buy with your money. And in doing it this way, you avoid the problem of intersectionality. You no longer need to take the millions of possible identities into account, because those millions of possible identities all of those ways in which you can be oppressed. That is the fatal flaw, in my opinion, of the intersectional theory. The leftist argument against this is that not all identities are equally valid. I mean, they will say to you in general that all identities are valid, but there are very clearly some that they do not put inside intersectional theory. For example, you have that meme floating around right now that gamers are the most oppressed minority. You know, we live in a society, bottom text, that kind of stuff. But it does technically fit within intersectional theory. They really don't like it, but it does. Being a gamer or not being a gamer is a characteristic about yourself. And if you come from my generation, a generation where almost nobody played video games, yeah, you got bullied at school if you played them. Of course, it's not just gamers. Any identifiable characteristic about yourself that anybody for any reason has at some point disparaged you for, you could claim as oppression. That opens the door for you to be oppressed by quite literally anything about you. But it fits with the theory. Therefore, the meme, gamers are the most oppressed minority, is not poking fun at the idea that gamers think that they're oppressed just because they got bullied in school. It's poking fun at how nonsensical the entirety of intersectional theory is. But that is politically inconvenient. So intersectionalists do say that only some parts of your identity actually matter when it comes to intersectionality. But they never really make it clear where the line is drawn. You think that it would be drawn at immutable characteristics. So for example, you can't change your physical sex, although trans activists are really pushing that right now. You certainly can't change your race. There seems to be very little evidence in the way of being able to change your sexual orientation, so because those are immutable characteristics, those should be protected and considered under intersectionality, while the mutable characteristics, the stuff that you can change, like say, being a gamer, shouldn't be considered, because if you were actually oppressed for being a gamer, wouldn't you just stop playing video games? If it were that serious, I mean, probably. But the immutable characteristics line is not perfect either. Because, for example, the intersectionalists view religion as being one of the categories that you can be discriminated against for. And yet you can change your religion. If you are discriminated against for being a Muslim, you can convert away from Islam. You can stop practicing that religion. It's the same thing with culture. The people on the radical left do believe that culture can and should be changed, swiftly and with state action. They advocate for it. You even get people like Joe Biden and, what was her name? Ayanna Pressley. They both made statements in the past that legal change is not enough. We have to change the culture.
I realize I get a little too passionate about this sometimes, but we all have an obligation to do nothing less than change the culture in this country. That's just the laws. We change the laws. Change the culture.
So if culture can be changed, and it's not an immutable characteristic, why should it be protected? Why should the excuse of it's my culture be valid within leftist thought? What about thin privilege and fat oppression? The intersectional left loves that stuff, but you can literally just lose the weight. We know for a fact that, with the exception of the most extreme circumstances, the rarest of the rare cases, body weight is not immutable. And to get back to the trans question, according to at least some trans activists, because gender isn't immutable as well, then it also doesn't count. But very clearly they don't view it this way. They don't seem to exclude things based on whether or not they're immutable, even though that is certainly how they present the issue. It seems to me that they exclude things arbitrarily from intersectional theory. They exclude things based on political expedience. But if you were to be an honest intersectionalist, and you did not exclude things solely for political reasons, but included into the theory everything, every part of your personality, you would very quickly realize two things. One, that intersectionality becomes entirely useless in day-to-day life, because there is no way you can even collect enough information about every single person that you meet in order to properly fractionate all of their identities, let alone actually be able to do the math on that. And two, you would also very quickly realize that if you ever were to actually do that, you would arrive at an individual. And I think this is what some of the libertarian thinkers mean when they say that the individual is the greatest minority of all, because there is only one individual against an entire society. And it is because if you were to actually work through the infinite math that is intersectionality, you would arrive at a completely unique person. I may demographically be like you in some ways, but no matter how similar we are, if we were to add up every single data point of our lives and then compare them, eventually we would come across a difference. And that would be what makes us individuals. So even though intersectionality is correct, individuality solves the problem of intersectionality, and it does it in a much more efficient and less oppressive way. Another thing that the radical left is right about is the problem of inequality. Inequality is a real problem. Too much inequality does in fact destabilize societies. If you have an entire 99% of people who live in abject poverty, and you have a 1% of people that lives high constantly with no middle class, if there is no legitimate way for advancement, then why wouldn't the people revolt? I mean, if they upend the entire thing, maybe they'll be back in the exact same position, but maybe they'll be in the 1% this time. Who knows? We do know that at least some level of inequality is required to have an economy. That is because an economy is simply individuals acting freely. Therefore, you have some individuals who are inclined to constantly work. It's just in their personality to work like 20-hour days, 7 days a week, for 50 years. And therefore, they generate a disproportionate amount of production and gain a disproportionate amount of wealth. Freedom means not only the freedom to work or not work, it also means the freedom to work at what you like. Some careers will be more useful and therefore more lucrative. And freedom means the freedom to choose a career that might not pay as much. Freedom means the freedom to fail. Or it means the freedom to succeed, but to do so suboptimally. If it takes you 6 years to get a 4-year degree, you're 2 years behind. And those people who got the degree in 4 years, well, they have the freedom to get it in 4 years. And you have the freedom to get it in 6. Freedom does mean the freedom to make mistakes. All of these freedoms mean that people are basically allowed to work at their pace. They still have to maintain themselves. They still have to pay for their food and stuff because their own maintenance is their own responsibility. But for all that stuff that is above and beyond, people are free to go for it, or not. And it is that difference, it is that inequality in personality that generates inequality in the market. It generates inequality of income, it generates inequality of status, it generates inequality of wealth. You do this for a few generations, you have an economy. So we do need inequality to generate wealth and to keep society running. But you can't have too much inequality such that those in the bottom who would actually want to try to work their way up have no meaningful path to do so. Because if there is no meaningful path to do so, then they will destroy the system in an attempt to make a meaningful path to do so. The people on the left throw around this African proverb, those who are excluded from the village will burn it to feel its warmth. And that is true on some level. People will do what they want to do. If there is a legal, non-violent option for them to do what they want, they'll take it. If there isn't one, then they'll risk it. So if a society truly does have growing inequality, that's a problem that needs to be solved. And the issue that we're having is that we don't quite know how to solve it. The left's ideas regarding these redistribution schemes and, like UBI or high taxes, whatever, that stuff doesn't seem to work long term. We don't know what to do about the problem of equality. The left's ideas don't work, and the right's idea of let's ignore it, it's not a real problem, is asinine. Now we're getting deep into the neo-Marxism because this kind of connects very nicely with the idea that structures are oppressive. And yes, they are. The left is right about that too. A structure is oppressive. It's oppressive to those within it, and it is especially oppressive to those who are not in it. Hierarchies are inherently tyrannical, unless you are, of course, at the very top of the hierarchy. But the radical left's reply, destroy all hierarchy, destroy the structures of society, that is even worse, because then you have nothing. Maybe they prefer nothing, Maybe there are some people on the left who are more predisposed to enjoy chaos, while there are some people on the right who are more predisposed to enjoy tyrannical order, even if they are ground under the boot of it. But even though structures are oppressive, you can't simply take away the structure. Structures are what orient you in the world, at least in some way. Going back to the degree example, if you and I are getting the same degree, you get it in 4 years and I get it in 6 years. And the reason I took 2 extra years is because I kept failing classes, or I had to take less classes because I didn't have the money, whatever. Then yes, the university structure is in some way oppressing me. There are things about my life that I have to deal with that you don't. There are problems that I have that are preventing me from graduating on time. And therefore, the standards that I have to reach in order to get this degree, even though they're the same standard between us, they're harder for me to reach due to these extra circumstances. So the structure would be oppressing me more than it's oppressing you in that case. But that oppression it's a necessary part in human advancement. If there is no chance of failing something, then the success means nothing. Personal growth comes not only through victory, but through defeat. Sometimes you have to be destroyed so that you can be rebuilt. That's the whole walking through the fire analogy. You don't get to do that unscathed. Some parts of you will burn off. And that is a painful process to be sure, but it's what's left after that process that's important. So yes, the structures of society are inherently oppressive, but that is because they have standards and they judge you for not reaching them. I mean, how many times have you seen some self-centered person scream something like, "Don't judge me"? But the idea of a judge is that it is not only the thing that judges you, it is the thing that you aspire to be. That's why, for example, when you get a new job and you want to go in and make a good first impression with the new boss, yes, you are being judged, and you're usually nervous about it, but you're also looking to do a good job. You're looking to climb the hierarchy here. The thing that judges you as either worthy or unworthy is also the thing that you are aspiring to become yourself through your own work. I think the religious folks really understand the purpose of judgment, at least some of them. There's always going to be some crazies out there, those people who simply use religion as a method by which they abuse other people. But at least the honest religious folk out there understand that judgment is not meant to make you feel oppressed. That is a side effect that can't be avoided. Judgment is the crucible in which you are made. And you really aren't you. Like the current person that you are right now, that's not you. You were very different earlier in your life, and you will be very different in the next 5 to 10 years. You are not your current personality or your current ambitions or your current property, your current location, your current job. You're not any of that. You are what's left after you walk through the fire. You are what's left after you go through the crucible. You are what's left after you are judged, and then those things about you that are insufficient have to go away, and then you build a different life. You are the thing that exists between multiple iterations of yourself. And that cannot happen unless you have some kind of oppressive structure with which you can discipline yourself within. And I think that's why a lot of the people who complain about judgment or who complain about structures being inherently oppressive, they're like 35-year-old man-children. Because they've never changed. They've never shaped themselves into anything beyond what they were when they were 14. Of course, the big answer on the left to this whole thing is that nothing has inherent value. And again, the left is correct. Nothing has inherent value. I think this is what causes a lot of nihilism in people when they kind of realize that, let's be honest, religion isn't really real. God probably doesn't exist. There is probably nothing after death but the void, and that reality does not care about you one way or another. There is an entire material universe out there that you will never experience. You will likely never leave this planet. And when you are gone, all of those stars and planets out there will keep spinning as if you never existed. Reality really doesn't have a moral arc. Things do not have inherent value. The postmodernists on the radical left are completely correct in this. And that is fundamentally what fuels their nihilism. That's what fuels their desire to become Marxists. Because if there is nothing metaphysical, if there really is only darkness out there, then a person like that would probably, one, be completely invested in the pleasure principle, simply acting in a way that is purely selfish and feels the best for the time and avoiding as much pain as they can. And two, desire a society that will allow them to do that no matter what. Because if there's no inherent value, then there's no ideal to strive towards. And if all you have left is impulsive pleasure seeking in order to try and stave off the fear of death, then all of society should be structured around that. Hence the communist utopia. It really is like a baby's first nihilism kind of philosophy. And I went through that phase myself, at least a little bit, but I kind of figured out very quickly that kind of impulsive pleasure seeking was fun for a little bit, but it rapidly made things worse. And that the gift of nihilism is not that things have no inherent meaning and therefore we should all simply inject heroin and jack our brains up to feel nothing but pleasure until we inevitably die, but rather that because things have no inherent value, that means that I can assign value to them as a free-thinking person. I can value my girlfriend because of the relationship we have, not because she has any inherent value as far as the universe is concerned, but because of what she means to me. I can find the people in my life valuable, or I can find new people to find valuable if the ones around me aren't really worth it. I can find value in the stuff that I build, even if I know that one day it will be gone. I can find value in the people that I help, even if I know that one day I'll be gone and so will they. If you can alleviate some of the unnecessary suffering in life, that might not have any inherent value, but it can certainly have value to you. You would have to basically be a sociopath to not, enjoy the feeling that you get when you've bought someone a birthday gift, for example, and it's exactly what they want, and they unwrap it, and they're ecstatic. These things don't have inherent value, but based on your own personality, you can definitely find things that have value to you. And if you're a well-rounded person, that will be enough to carry you forward through your life. Of course, if you're underdeveloped, then it won't. I've noticed that people on the left, they like to say that it's the far right, it's the alt-right, they're destroying society right now. People on the right say the same thing about the left. They call them leftists, liberals, Marxists, whatever. My point is that it's neither. We need both liberalism and conservatism. But not only do we need them, We can never actually rid ourselves of one or the other. There will always be personality types that are more suited to liberal thought. There will always be personality types that are more suited to conservative thought. And liberals and conservatives both bring different yet useful things to the table. Liberals often have personality types that make them more open to new experiences, more creative. They're not just our society's artists, but also our engineers. They come up with the new ideas. Meanwhile, conservatives have personality types that lend them more to be organizers. They might not invent the next big thing, but they will definitely optimize it. The liberals and the conservatives are two essential cogs in the machine. If you remove either of them, the entire thing falls apart. You need both, and you need them both working together. So, as a centrist, it's important to understand what the left actually gets right, and not simply throw the baby out with the bathwater. Alright, that about does it for me. I'll talk to you guys soon. I love you.